Thank you, Dee. Thank you for all the work that you've done putting this panel together, and thank you for the work of the Education Commission. I've been a part of this organization for many, many years, and I just want to applaud the work, particularly the recent work of the Education Commission and all that they've done to bring many different issues and causes and education to working class folks across the country and around the world. My name is Kooper Caraway. I am the current president of the South Dakota Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO, and a member of AFSCME Local 519. So I'm here to talk about the Richard L. Trumka PRO Act, as recently renamed Richard L. Trumka PRO Act after the passing of our beloved brother and comrade Richard Trumka, who passed away not long ago. For those of you who don't know, the PRO Act is an amalgamation of different pro-labor legislation. So over the past 50 years, the labor movement has attempted to reform the National Labor Relations Act. The National Labor Relations Act is the law that governs labor organizing and labor-employer relations in this country. And over the last 50 years, the labor movement, working class people, and the broader movement for democracy have attempted to pass different smaller reforms to the National Labor Relations Act with little success. The PRO Act, P-R-O, Protecting the Right to Organize Act, is an amalgamation of all of the attempted progressive labor reform over the last 50 years put into one large piece of legislation. Some of you may have heard that Senator Bernie Sanders was getting the PRO Act passed through budget reconciliation in his role as chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. This is true, and it is not true at the same time. He is only able, as chair of the Budget Committee, he is only able to pass the sections of the PRO Act that have to do with the Labor Department's ability to fine employers for anti-labor activity. So we'll go through some of the specific sections of the PRO Act now, and the sections of the current labor law that the PRO Act seeks to reform and change. And then we'll get into why you all should care about this piece of legislation and the movement behind it. So right now, under current labor law, employers can drag out a union election process. And so a union election is the way that workers achieve unionization. Usually the National Labor Relations Board comes down and conducts an election wherein workers vote union yes or union no. And if a majority vote yes, then the employer is legally obligated to negotiate with the workers collectively. And so at this time, the NLRB is and will continue to be the principal government agency responsible for enforcing the rights of private sector workers to organize and engage in collective bargaining. But the current labor law prevents the labor board from doing their job by giving too much power to employers. Those employers are able to use delaying tactics to postpone elections while giving them more time to campaign against the union and against the workers. Under the PRO Act, it's the workers themselves and the National Labor Relations Board are the ones who will set the union election procedures. The employer will not be involved in setting the union election procedures, so the employer will not be able to put in these delaying tactics and things like this. Under current labor law, employers have free reign to make their employees attend what are called captive audience meetings. At these captive audience meetings, either the employer or a paid consultant of the employer, a highly paid consultant of the employer, can insist on the employees attending mandatory meetings. So they tell the workers, you have to come in at this time, and you have to sit through this hour-long, 2-hour-long, sometimes 3-hour-long meeting, where basically the employer or their hired consultant just gets up and says lie after lie after lie after lie after half truth after half truth after half truth about the union's intentions, the labor movement in general, what will happen if the workers choose to unionize, and whatnot. And they can do this as many times as they want to. Under the PRO Act, the employer will not be able to force workers to attend these sorts of captive audience meetings where they can just lie about the union and about the labor movement. Under current law, workers usually are forced to wait months and sometimes even years to be reinstated or receive back pay after being unlawfully fired by their employer for joining together with their coworkers to improve their wages and working conditions. So right now, workers are protected under what's called a protected concerted activity, technically by the law. So if a worker is trying to form a union, talking to their coworkers about unionizing wages, stuff like that, it's technically against the law for an employer to retaliate against them or fire them or something like that. But they do it anyway because the law makes workers wait months and months and months or years and years and years before they're ruled to have to be reinstated or receive the back pay from the firing and stuff like that. And by the time the workers are reinstated or receive back pay, the unionization drive usually has died down, especially if it was a number of significant leaders that were fired or retaliated against. So employers are constantly violating their workers' rights to talk to their coworkers about unionizing or wages or benefits. Under the PRO Act would require the National Labor Relations Board to go to court and get an injunction against the employer to immediately reinstate the workers if the employer has retaliated against them. So rather than waiting months and months or years and years, the PRO Act necessitates that the labor board goes to court and gets an injunction against further retaliation against the employer and immediately reinstates those workers so that they can get back to doing their jobs. Under current labor law, employers who violate workers' rights or any other section of the National Labor Relations Act face no civil penalties. But under the PRO Act, employers who commit violations of the National Labor Relations Act will face civil penalties, and corporate officials can be held personally liable for violation of the law. CEOs, HR managers, whoever's in charge of overseeing these types of activities, they can be held personally liable for their anti-union and anti-working class actions. Currently, under labor law, workers are prohibited from bringing civil lawsuits against their employer for violating the National Labor Relations Act. They can bring lawsuits against their employer for some other reasons, but they cannot specifically bring lawsuits against the employer or for violating the National Labor Relations Act. So if it's in regards to organizing or labor struggles or terms and conditions of work or anything like that, they can't sue their employer. But the PRO Act will give the workers the right to file civil action against their employer. Similarly, currently employers are allowed to force workers to sign arbitration agreements. So these arbitration agreements are usually buried somewhere in this large stack of paperwork that new hires are given. When a new worker is hired to a new job, we all have to go through a few days or a full day of just signing paperwork. So they bury what's called arbitration agreements in these large stacks of paperwork. And in those arbitration agreements, when the worker signs those arbitration agreements, what they're doing is they're waiving their right to collective or class action litigation. So, for example, what that means is, for example, a newly hired woman worker who signs one of these arbitration agreements, whether she realizes what she's signing or not, she's waiving her right to engage to then collectively sue the employer with other female workers as part of a class action lawsuit if the employer is engaged in discriminatory or sexist or harassing behavior towards the women workers in that area. And that goes for any other type of class action lawsuit. The workers are not able to engage in class action lawsuits against their employer. Under the PRO Act, collective lawsuits and class action waivers, those arbitration agreements, those class action waivers will be illegal. They'll be banned under the PRO Act. So employers will not be able to ask workers to sign them. And even if workers do sign them, they will be unenforceable by law. So under current labor law, employers oftentimes, particularly in the new so-called gig economy, or what many of us in labor call the exploitation economy, employers are regularly able to misclassify workers as independent contractors when they're really full-time employees, full-time workers who are working just like everyone else, but they can pick and choose this handful or this section and label them independent contractors. And when they label them independent contractors, what it does is it deprives those workers who have been labeled contractors, it deprives them of their rights that they would have, that they would be guaranteed as employees. And under current labor law, that is not a violation of the Labor Act. That is not a violation of labor law now. That is perfectly legal to take a worker and have them work 40, 50, 60 hours a week and have all the same expectations as you would a regular full-time employee. But because they're labeled as an independent contractor, they're not guaranteed the same wage, safety, health guarantees that labor law provides full-time employees. Under the PRO Act, it would make employee misclassification a violation under the National Labor Relations Act, and it would further require employers to follow what's called the ABC test for employee classification. The ABC test is this very strict legal test for making sure that employees are not misclassified as independent contractors. And I want to say there's a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of folks will say that this will eliminate people's ability to act as independent contractors if they so choose, and it will not. There will still be people who are independent contractors who act as independent contractors. What this, the only thing that this section of the PRO Act addresses is when the employer themselves misclassify workers who are doing the same job and want to be workers and considered employees, full-time employees, part-time employees, whatever. It will prevent them from taking those full-time employee workers who are full-time employees in deed and in act and in every way except through classification. It will prevent them from classifying them as independent contractors. People who choose to engage in independent contracting will still be able to do that. Under current labor law, multiple employers are able to dictate workers' terms of employment while also evading the collective bargaining process with employees. So a growing problem as the bosses are outsourcing various functions to contractors and subcontractors. So under this system, each employer is likely to shift responsibility to other employers, right? And so you have, for example, the situation with the Nabisco strike, right? So there's a strike under Nabisco. Nabisco is a company that's owned by Mondelez International, right? And that's the case with many of our employers, many bosses around the world. You're not just working for who signs your paycheck. They're part of a national conglomerate. And then that national conglomerate may be part of an international conglomerate. And it goes up and up and up. And so they can move responsibility back and forth however they so choose. They can move liability back and forth however they so choose. They can move responsibility back and forth however they so choose. Under the PRO Act, it will codify what's called a joint employer standard, which means that all firms that share control over a worker's terms of employment are considered to be employers of that worker and are thus required to bargain with employees. So they can't shift the responsibility to negotiate with the workers to a subsidiary or to a conglomerate or anything like that. They can't shift their responsibility. Anyone who's involved, they all share the collective responsibility to bargain with their workers. Further, the PRO Act, under current labor law, the states have right to work laws. So in the majority of states, 28, 29 states in the country, they have so-called right to work laws. So these laws seek to undermine unions' ability to collect what's called fair share fees. So in my state, South Dakota is one of the first right to work states, has right to work since 1947. So a lot of folks have a misunderstanding of what right to work is. Right to work laws do not mean that you're not forced to join a union. That's not what that means. That's covered under federal Taft-Hartley legislation. Right to work, all it means is that the workers and the bosses cannot negotiate for non-members to pay a fair share fee in the contract. That's all it means. And what it leads to, it's a cynical attempt to bankrupt labor organizations, because then it forces through the combining right to work laws along with exclusive representation laws. What it does is it makes it to where the union organizations and labor organizations are forced to do a whole lot of free labor and free work and represent workers who are not participants in the union process, and do not contribute any sort of fee, right? So these fair share fees, they cover the cost of bargaining, they cover the cost of contract arbitration, they cover the cost of grievance processing. The unions all the unions are required by law to undertake through the law of the duty of fair representation, on behalf of all members of the collective bargaining unit. So without fair share fees, union power starts to degrade quickly, which is exactly what they're meant for. Under the PRO Act, states must allow private employers and unions to enter into those fair share agreements. So the PRO Act would effectively ban all right to work laws in regards to the private sector across the entire country. Further, under current labor law, employers are able to use slick legal maneuverings and litigation to drag out the process of bargaining over a first contract. So a lot of times, even if the workers have worked together and struggled and successfully been able to achieve a union and get a recognized union in their workplace, when it comes time to negotiate their first union contract, the employer will intentionally drag out this process. So it takes a year, 2 years, a very, very long time before they can even get this contract. The PRO Act would require all employers to follow a process for reaching that first contract agreement when workers organize. And it's a process that uses mediation if they can't come to an agreement quickly, and then if necessary, a binding arbitration, which will enable the workers and the bosses to reach a first agreement in a timely manner. So timely, typically within the first year. That's when you want it. If contract is taking longer than that, then you know the boss is up to some shady dealings. So right now, the workers, we've seen kind of an upsurge in recent years, past 2, 3, 4 years, of workers engaging in their right to strike, right, or their right to collective action. But these rights are very, like many rights under the bourgeois democratic system, many rights are carefully curated, carefully restricted, and so there's very few just unlimited rights that working class people have. So right now there's the right to strike, but it's very limited in scope. The PRO Act, though, would currently prohibit employers from permanently replacing striking workers. So right now, yeah, you can go on strike, but the boss can replace you with new workers if they so choose. And the PRO Act would prohibit that. Right now, the employer has the right to engage in what are called offensive lockouts. And so an offensive lockout is when an employer or boss basically says, you know what, we don't like the way these negotiations are going, or we don't like the way that the union's acting, we don't like the way that the workers are acting, something like that. And they can just lock everybody out. And physically lock the doors of the plant or of the workplace, physically prevent people from coming into work, and say, look, talk to your union, talk to your workers, figure it out, and basically try to starve those workers into submitting to lower wages than they need to. The PRO Act would prevent that type of behavior. Right now, the current labor law prohibits workers from engaging in secondary activities. Secondary activities, secondary strike activity, what some folks call, historically sometimes called a sympathy strike, sometimes called a solidarity strike. It's when, so say, I work at a plant and that's a national plant, or that plant has other subsidiaries, or the operations of that plant are connected to some other businesses around the country. So say me and my fellow workers go on strike at a particular plant, right? And that plant contracts with a logistics or a trucking company or something like that. Right now, it would be considered a secondary boycott if, in reaction to our strike at our plant, you work at that trucking company, if you all decided that you are also going to go on strike against your trucking company for contracting with the plant where we're engaged in a strike, the current labor law would consider that a secondary boycott, a secondary strike, and that would prohibit that sort of activity. The PRO Act would allow for that. So not only would the trucking company that my plant contracts with be able to go on strike, but if they contract with it, or if they contract or do any sort of business dealings with any other companies, you all would be able to go on strike. Anyone who works for anyone who has any dealings with the company that I'm engaged with would all be able to go on strike to apply maximum pressure to the primary target or to that employer, so that they are compelled to come to an agreement with those workers. It would allow, basically would allow working class people more freedom to stand in solidarity with each other. So those are the main bullet points of the PRO Act. Those are the main things that they seeks to change. And each one of these, for the most part, each one of these pieces of legislation, or each one of these bullet points used to be their own separate pieces of legislation that workers would fight for, that have been fighting for decades. And so the significance of this is that these are all of these pieces of legislation brought into one, and are being pushed to get passed at the same time when there are Democratic majorities in the House and Senate. So why should the people on this call care about the PRO Act? The point is that any piece of legislation, big or small, that allows working class people more room to organize themselves is beneficial to folks of the philosophy that we share, because it's a training ground. A great man once said the labor movement is training ground for revolutionaries, and that is absolutely true. The end goal of many people on this call is for the working class to be able to control their own lives, their own destiny, their own resources, their own communities, and to be able to shape the world however they so choose. And so the thing is, workers don't, especially workers who have been born into an exploitative system, raised in an exploitative system, and lived their whole lives in a system based entirely on their exploitation, the exploitation of their coworkers and of their communities and families. Those workers do not inherently have the knowledge and ability to run society on their own, to organize society on their own. So there must be room to train working class people on how to organize themselves, how to organize their communities, how to organize their workplaces, and every function of society. And so anything that gives the labor movement more ability to organize more workers, that's more workers that are being trained on a day-to-day basis on how to run meetings, on how to negotiate contracts, on how these different plants and different industries are run, and things like this, so that they can more effectively run their own workplaces and organize themselves in a democratic way to have more control over their society. And so that when one day, when these working class people do inherit the keys of the political and economic system, they will be able and be better trained and more able to take those keys and not only run society as it is now in a caretaker way, but they'll be much better trained and how to transform the society. But before you can transform it, you have to know how this society works, and you have to know how these different workplaces and industries and political systems, you have to know how all these things work. And so if you have a piece of legislation like this, which gives the workers far more rights to organize themselves and to take ownership over their workplaces and things like that, and educates them and gets them involved in the discussion on how these different industries are working, if they understand how it works, all the little nitty-gritty details and things like that, then they'll be much more equipped that when they inherit control and ownership over the political and economic system, then not only will they be able to know how it works, they'll be able to transform it into a way that serves them, their class, their families, and their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Kooper. Now we would like to, Kooper, please close your mic. Thank you so much. and we'll come back to Kooper during the discussion. But right now, we'd like to turn the mic over to a guest speaker, Angel. And unfortunately, we don't have a webcam for Angel. Sorry, Angel, okay, there you are. So unfortunately, we don't have a webcam for Angel, but we will be able to hear her. And turning the floor over to Angel, please introduce yourself, Angel. Tell everybody who you are.
Hello, everyone. Thank you and good evening. It's always a pleasure to be in just come solidarity. Excuse me here. I'm Angel Wells. I'm the Labor Council lead here in Arizona, and I'm also the Secretary Treasurer of CWA Communication Workers of America Local 7050. So I'm happy to be on this call with brothers and sisters today in the labor movement. I come to you to briefly tell you a little bit about someone who I'd love to remember, who this PROAC, I am honored to say this PROAC is named after, Mr. Richard Trumka, and just the contributions he did for women. I want to say that he was a warrior for labor, and that he's one that we will all miss, especially for women. He was a champion for women's rights, as well as just standing up for workers' rights here, and we definitely lost a true champion there. To combat this at this time, just excuse me, I'm a little tongue-tied here because I'm gathering my thoughts on him. So he was such a champion, especially for women. He spoke out against any xenophobia, racism, transphobia, homophobia, sexism. He stated that we needed to fight against sexism in solidarity in the workplace here. We needed to do it rightfully and safely in every workplace. He stood up and made sure that everyone knew that no type of bullying, harassment, or assault would ever be tolerated in our workforce and our labor movement. And that's the spirit we need to carry forward here. We definitely need to pass this PROAC. We definitely need better workers' rights, and I'm happy to know that this PROAC is named after someone that I admire and I champion. I hope to walk even a milestone in his footsteps. I thank you all so much.
Angel, we hope you'll stay with us, and then during the discussion, you can participate in helping to answer any questions that are presented. So thank you so much. And next time we will have you come on so that we can see practice your webcam and use it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So now yeah, thank you, Angel. So now I'd like to turn the mic over to someone we've known for years. I'll just leave it at that. Steve, the mic is yours. Steve, you have to unmute.
Thank you so much, Dee. It's really a timely moment to have this class today on the PROAC and to talk a little bit about brother Trumka. You know, my name is Steve Valencia, and I've been the chair of the local coalition of Jobs with Justice for a long time, going on 32 years. So we've seen a lot of struggle here in this part of the country. This is the southern part of Arizona. You know, I'm also part of the Salt of the Earth Labor College, and on the operating committee of that school for, again, another 3 decades. And also I wanted to say that over the years, we have become affiliated. Job with Justice is affiliated to the Pima Area Labor Federation, and we actually enjoy a close relationship with the labor movement, and I'm very proud of the relationships that we have. I got to say that that's not always the way it was. I know that at the very beginnings of Job with Justice, it was pretty tough. It was a pretty tough time. There was some comments made by one of the former leaders of Job with Justice, Fred Escarate, who used to say that, people that came out for job of justice within the labor movement were pretty much blacklisted. It wasn't really expanded or cared for, and so it was like very difficult in the early days. And in speaking about the early days, I think it was in 1987 when I was helping to organize the pecan workers in Sahuarita, Arizona, and along with the steel workers, United Steelworkers of America. And I remember during that time, the organizer, Alex Lopez, may he rest in peace, was the organizer trying to get a contract for the pecan workers. And he had a button that said "Jobs with Justice." And I said, "Hey, Alex, what is that?" He said, "Oh, it's kind of a new form, kind of some crazy people in a way, trying to make a difference within the labor movement." But that is the very first time I ever saw that, back in 1987, and that was actually the year that Job of Justice was founded. And I just wanted to say just very briefly that in 1987, Job of Justice was founded, and it was in the face of a brutal, onslaught from Eastern Airlines against the Machinists Union, and it was a big strike in Florida. And it was then where Larry Cohen then was the international president of the Communication Workers of America, and the other unions within the Industrial Union Department of the AFL-CIO said that we need a forum within the labor movement that can up our, we can hit the streets, and where we can do things to try to protect ourselves against the union bashing, the union busting that was put into effect by Ronald Reagan in 1980. And so they said we cannot do it on our own. The labor movement is very strong. It is pivotal in all these questions of social transformation, but it needs help. And the help has to come from the other sectors of the working class, and it has to be labor and community. And so that was the founding concept in 1987 that brought forward the Job of Justice Coalition. And basically, the Coalition of Job of Justice is a labor and community campaign for workers' rights, and so it is very broad. And it's I got to say it's a multi-issue coalition. We try to keep up with all the different movements that are afoot, and it's becoming harder. And I'm glad that it's becoming harder to keep up. And so we became involved. We're actually a part of a larger coalition called the Arizona Coalition to End the Filibuster. So Job of Justice is part of this. It's a statewide forum, and it was brought together by these disparate groups all over the country that were fighting for everything from immigrant rights to climate change to the PRO Act, LGBTQ, all of the important issues that we have. Everybody was fighting for these things, and what folks realized is that there was one big rock in the road, a big obstacle, and that was the filibuster, a relic of the Jim Crow era, and very much the point of the racist, the deep exploitation of labor, anti-democratic, and really in the way of progressing society and for the rights of workers. And so we joined this coalition, and here in a couple of minutes, in a minute or two, we're going to show a video, and it's a video that shows the one of the efforts made in Phoenix, Arizona, at the offices of Senator Sinema, encouraging her to vote against the filibuster for the rights of the people, for democratic rights, voting rights, the PRO Act, a whole list of items that we need in order to proceed. So, before I do that, I wanted to just share just a little bit about the Richard Trumka, our leader that has passed away. And one of the things that comes up in my mind is that he always believed that an injury to one is an injury to all. And so I remember him from the great Pittston strike. And there's a video called "Holding the Line at Pittston," which is a really beautiful campaign of resistance. The other part that I remember is the California campaign for domestic workers' Bill of Rights, and Brother Trumka was there to lend his powerful voice to that movement, as well as the many hours and days that he spent fighting for the Affordable Care Act. And one thing too, I remember at the early days, Java Justice here in Tucson was formed in June of 1990. And I remember telling everybody how great Java Justice was, the model of organizing and so forth. And so I wound up taking a real good friend of ours, Charlie Salas, a steelworker leader, and I took him to an annual Java Justice, meeting in Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh, and it was going to be really close to the headquarters of the Steelworker Union, so I knew he couldn't resist. So when he went there, the first thing he said was, Steve, I thought you were just jiving me about this movement. And he looked and he thought how beautiful this is, with labor and community in coalition together, fighting for the rights of workers. And who was there as a keynote speaker was Richard Trumka himself. And he gave a fiery speech, and he was all about linking the various community organizations with labor, and to specifically reach out to these organizations to make sure that we were a very large, broad, movement for democracy. And so he was really inspiring that day. And I always remember, him getting up there and doing that. And I think that the legacy of people like Fred Escarate, and Larry Cohen, and Richard Trumka has laid down the kind of a legacy that's really now being followed by Sarita Gupta, who is the executive director of Java Justice, and now Erica Smiley, who leads that coalition. And they brought that model forward. And I just got to say that I am so happy that in the state of Arizona, we have people like Fred Yamashita, we have Trish Muir, we have the Maricopa Area Labor Federation, Pima Area Labor Federation, and a very progressive, visionary kind of a leader in Fred Yamashita. And I'm so happy that that the tide changed, and they kind of let loose the democratic forces in the state, and they are it's like a really well-oiled machine now, and so happy for their leadership, because it wasn't always that good. I'll tell you that right now. At any rate, I wanted to show this video. Make some noise a little bit, see something different, on the screen. And this is what we do. This is what we link up with. And this is the reason why we do it is to fight against the filibuster and unleash the democratic forces of our working class to attain good things in this life that we have. So I think I'll go ahead and start playing the video, and then we can talk some more on the other side of it, okay? So let me see if I can do this. Shouldn't be too hard. So here we go. Let me know what you think. Okay. Okay. So that was it right there. I'd like to thank Richard Bourne for that fine video. And also I wanted to let you know that the young sister that spoke a bit ago, Angel Wells, is also in that video, along with other sisters and brothers from the Communication Workers of America, Local 7050, and also she walked with Yolanda Bejarano, who is a huge leader here in Arizona and part of the political directorship of the, within the district for CWA. So we've known these people for a long time, and we're just happy that we're just all together working on this thing. We got involved with the Arizona Coalition to end filibuster, and we were invited by the AFL-CIO. Veronica Martinez asked us to be a part, and we did, and trying to do the best we can. Let me just say very, very briefly, is that we are at a different transition point right now. We're at a crossroads. The idea is that we've had so many actions through the labor movement. We've had so many civil disobedience actions, sit-ins, with Reverend Barber, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Barbara Arnwine, and a lot of different, points from the, a lot of actions by the labor movement. And, Senator Sinema has not moved. And so now this Arizona Coalition to End the Filibuster has been convening meetings on the question of what we're going to do. And what the decision has been is that we're going to give an ultimatum to Senator Sinema to do the right thing. And if she does not, then we will launch a primary campaign with a crowd pack funding mechanism that would let her know that we mean business. And so that's what the decision is now. We're tired of fooling around, and September 13th is going to be the earliest time in the Senate to vote on this filibuster. So we need to keep our eyes peeled and listen to what's going on. At any rate, it's been a long haul. We ain't done, and I'm so happy to be here with Kooper, Caraway, and Angel Wells. And thank you for the Education Commission and Dee Miles. She's been orchestrating this thing, and I'm so happy to be here. So I guess that would end my presentation. Thank you, Dee.
Okay, on behalf of everyone, I want to thank you all very much. And Angel is still with us. So now we will, for Angel and Steve and Kooper, please think about specific things that we can do at our workplace and in our communities to organize in support of the PRO Act and against the filibuster. But now we're going to open the floor to the audience to have them raise any questions or comments that they'd like to make. So if you'd like to raise a question or introduce a comment, please use your raised hand icon. Now I see a number of you have written comments, but there's only one tech person. So if you have a question or comment, please put your mouse cursor on the picture of the hand, click it. That will let me know you want to introduce a question or make a comment, and we can open up your mic. So please use your raised hand icon. Just put your mouse cursor on the picture of the hand to indicate that you want to speak. All right, Clinton, your mic is open. Open your mic on your end. Put your mouse cursor on the picture of the mic and click it. There it is.
Hey, so this is a pretty basic question, but I just wanted to ask, what's a good way to start conversations about unionizing with your coworkers?
Okay, please write the question down if your memory is poor for whatever reason. And thank you, Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Clinton. And we'll take more questions or comments. A few more questions or comments. Looking for raised hands. Beth, your mic is open. Put your cursor on the picture of your mic, click it, and it will open. on your end. Put your clicker, the mouse cursor, on the picture of the mic on your control panel and click it.
Got it.
There you are. There you are.
What's your thinking on the upcoming March on Washington being led by the Poor People's Campaign for Voting Rights? What kind of stake do you think the labor movement has in this particular action?
Thank you, Beth. Looking for more raised hands, a few more questions, comments before we turn the mic back over to our panelists. Looking for more raised hands. Janice, your mic is open.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Excuse me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you for, that was great presentations and video. And I have a couple of questions. So I want to be sure when I'm talking with people that workers will gain further NLRB protections, whether they're in a union or not. Is that correct? With the passage of the PRO Act. And also, does anybody know what are some examples of enforcement mechanisms that the NLRB or whatever other relevant authorities would have under the PRO Act? For example, who would stop a company from locking out employees or keep an employer from canceling health benefits during a strike? Things like that. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Janice. Looking for a couple more raised hands. Okay, QQ, your mic is open.
Hello. I was wondering what the panelists think might go differently this time around compared to 2019. What are we hoping will go in favor of getting the PRO Act passed?
Thank you, QQ. And maybe one more. Okay, Howard, your mic is open. Put your mouse cursor, there you are. Speak up, please.
Me?
Howard,
Yes.
get closer to your mic and speak up, please.
Oh, I'm trying. I just was curious if the PRO Act will undo the Janus decision by the Supreme Court. Kooper mentioned, the various right-to-work states, but the Janus decision, in effect, as I understood, makes the whole country right to work. So does the PRO Act, in effect, overturn that?
Okay, so thank you, Howard. And so now we'll turn the floor back over to our panelists. So please take 2 to 3 minutes to respond to whichever questions you choose. Remember, we need as much help as you can provide with suggestions as to what we can do in our communities very quickly to help build support for the PRO Act. So let's start with Angel. Angel, you put your mouse cursor over, there you are. Put your mouse, there you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So about that first question there, what is a good way to start a conversation in the workplace amongst to start a union? You always well, what we do within my union, we start where we meet everyone on the same playing fields. Workers are normal human beings who come to their jobs for a living wage and for insurance and for the things that matter to them. So you start off normally within like your cafeterias or your lunch sites and everything, and you will hear the needs of some of your workers, and that's how you start to form a union there. You start to see like, hey, I'm working extra hours because I'm not paid as much, or hey, I'm working, but I really need to go to the doctor and I cannot because I can't afford to take a day off from work. So you might need better health care or better time off. Those are always things and ways to start that conversation about getting a union.
Thank you, Angel. So let's turn the floor over to, and any concluding remarks you'd like to make too at the end. So let's turn the floor over to Kooper.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for everyone watching, and particularly people who ask questions. So I'll run through a few of these. I think the thoughts on the Poor People's March on DC, I think Steve Valencia will have the best response there. I agree with Angel about how to talk to coworkers. I think that you want to start with conditions and shared experience and things like that. Very rarely is it effective for someone to go into a workplace and just say union, 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 and expect that to catch on, or speak in these kind of abstract ideas of worker power and stuff like that. Really, folks want to hear details, wages, benefits, hours, things that are affecting all of them. I'll say this, a key to a good metric when it comes to organizing or having organizing conversations is what we call the 80-20 model. You want to be listening 80% of the time and talking 20% of the time. And so what you want to do is, if you want to find out the things that are, again, number one, whatever's impacting you, whatever you don't like in your workplace, probably there's a whole bunch of people who don't like it either. But if you feel like you need to know more, then just ask. And everyone's always willing to vent about their day at work to most anybody who will listen. So you need to find out the conditions that need changed and then move on from there. Does the PRO Act apply to all workers? Yes, PRO Act applies to all workers. Currently, the National Labor Relations Act and protected concerted activity already applies to all workers. We saw this exercise in many places for a few years, kind of in the mid-2010s. It was kind of a tradition for on Black Friday for Walmart workers to walk out and go on strike. Walmart workers are, of course, not organized. They're not in a union. They're not part of a recognized collective bargaining unit or anything like that. But they went on strike anyway because they were or they walked out anyway because they were engaged in NLRA protected concerted activity. And so all sections of the National Labor Relations Act and labor law typically apply to all workers, union and non-union. And the PRO Act will do the same. They will apply to workers, all union, non-union. The enforcement mechanisms for the PRO Act will be similar to current enforcement mechanisms. So complaints of labor law violations will go through the National Labor Relations Board. They'll go through the National Department of Labor, led by Secretary Mahdi Walsh. It'll go through those channels and sometimes be considered in criminal court, sometimes in civil court. So in much the same way that a violation of child labor law or something like that would be investigated and enforced today, violations of the PRO Act and other labor law will be investigated and enforced and using those same mechanisms. Will the PRO Act undo Janus? So a common misconception about Janus, rightfully so, is that the Janus decision made the entire country a right to work state. The Janus decision did not make the entire country a right to work state. What the Janus decision did was make the entire country right to work in regards to the public sector. So public sector workers were no longer able to negotiate these fair share fees, no matter what state you live in. But the PRO Act is specific about private sector labor law reform. And so it will eliminate right to work laws that exist in states that prevent private employers from engaging in these fair share agreements with unions. So eliminate right to work for the public sector, for the private sector. There is a companion piece of legislation to the PRO Act that will extend the protections guaranteed in the PRO Act to public sector employees as well. But the Janus decision did not make the whole country a right to work state. The Janus decision only applies to people who work for local governments, state governments, things like that. And then what can we do? Okay, so what can we do? I'll say that the number one thing you can do is talk to people in your community, talk to your family, talk to your coworkers about the PRO Act, why it's important. If you don't have a union in your workplace, you need to talk to your coworkers about forming a union, about the conditions that are important to them so they can unionize. If you do got a union and you haven't joined for whatever reason, you need to get off your ass and you need to join your union and get involved, and then push your union to get involved in the fight for the PRO Act. If you live in a state where your senators already support or co-sponsor the PRO Act, what you need to do is organize events to thank them for supporting and co-sponsoring the PRO Act. Let them know that putting their neck out there a little bit for labor, they're going to get something out of it. That's the only language politicians understand, is transactional. And so it's give and take. So if they do something for us, we got to give them a thank you card, stuff like that, make them feel good about themselves, because that's the only way that they understand things. If they have not co-sponsored the PRO Act, or if they've been against the PRO Act, what you need to do is do like our brothers and sisters and comrades in Arizona, and put as much community pressure on them as you can. And then I want to say that similar to any type of revolutionary situation, winning, even if the PRO Act is successful, that's only the beginning of the process. If the PRO Act is passed, that's not the victory in and of itself. The PRO Act is just one step. Okay, so the PRO Act getting passed, what that means is that's more work for us, and rightfully so. The PRO Act getting passed means that we no longer have any excuse not to unionize every single worker across the country. We sit back and use the anti-labor laws and anti-worker laws and horrible exploitation and oppression of the United States and all these things as an excuse why we're not constantly organizing workers across this country every single day. Well, no longer that'll remove that crutch, remove that excuse. The PRO Act passed. We need to work every day to unionize as many workers as we can, so they can stand up and inherit the world that is rightfully theirs.
Okay, so now we'll turn the mic to, I want to say something. Thank you, Kooper. That's good enough to say. Steve, you have the mic.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on a couple of these things. I'm one of those guys that have to write down questions, but anyway, I wanted to, to have conversations, for example, with your coworkers. They tell us that in Amazon, you can't even talk to your coworkers. You know what I mean? That during the day, because during the work shift, because everybody is trying to keep up with robots, and everybody is like going 100 miles an hour in there. So it's very difficult, and then in break rooms at Amazon, for example, they've got cameras all over the place and they're watching people all the time. So I think that on a situation like that, in those similar situations, we always have to look for a collective in order to tell our brothers and sisters our burdens and tell them what's going on in the shops. And I think that some of those collectives are organized out of the labor movement, organizing committees out of the labor movement. But in this case over here in Tucson, we've used Jobs with Justice Coalition, and we have two meetings a month, and so we try to be accessible to the community, because there's always a lot of things going on that are hurting workers, and it's very unjust, and they're violating their rights all the time. And so we try to keep our door open to this kind of thing. So that's one way to have a discussion. It may not be directly at the start with your coworkers, but it's a real good beginning point to get a strategy on how to reach the other workers. Everybody needs guidance, and it doesn't matter what you've done, where you've been. You always need the guidance of the collective in order to help you make decisions. A few years ago, I was asked to come and meet with two women who worked at a domestic violence center. They would help women with their domestic violence issues. So I met with them, and they told me that the director of this center was also being abused by the director, which was actually being abused by a high-level police official in the police department, and they were so upset. And so we met, and I says, we could do something about this, and it would be pretty effective. But they would come back and they'd get you. They'd come back and there'd be retributions against you. I says, what you need is a union. And they said, oh yeah. So it took like 2 years of meeting every Saturday, with at least anywhere from 25 to 30 women. And we talked about all the ins and outs about what the company's going to do, how you should, develop your proposals, what to, how the NLRB works, and a lot of the pitfalls. So at any rate, there has to be some kind of a collective, and there's a lot of folks that have already had a lot of experience in trying to organize, and those are the folks that you should look for. Let me just I'll plug in Job of Justice real quick and say that Job of Justice in Tucson has expanded to Phoenix. And so we're trying to pull together a more of an organizational tie with the Phoenix and Tucson sector, that we can start to push out this model of labor community coalition and keep it there, so that we can do what the question is talking about, and having a collective, being able to talk to the workers. So this thing about that Reverend Jesse Jackson and Reverend Barber and Sister Barbara Arnwine from the Moral Majority, they were here in Tucson and got arrested with 37 other people in front of the cinema's office on July 27th. And if there's time today, it's like a 1 and 40-second video about that particular civil disobedience. But anyway, they have linked up with the efforts here in Arizona, and thank goodness that there's some really dynamic leaders of this Arizona coalition to end the filibuster that made contact with the Moral Majority and with Reverends Barber and Jackson. And so I think that is a beautiful thing to do, because this is national now. Everything has become nationalized. Our movements have to become larger, bigger. And I read a long time ago that real politics starts with millions of people in the street. And I believe it. And that's what we're trying to do, and put millions of people in the street in order to change the dynamics in this country, to put people before profits. I guess that's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I think before I try to play the video, I'd like to say that in the paper today, it was reported that both Reverend Jackson and his wife, Jackie Jackson, have been hospitalized for COVID. So we want to send get well thoughts to them. And thank you to Angel, thank you to Kooper, thank you to Steve. Thank you, everyone. Please have a good night.